our industry in the short term is a mechanism of flexibility and competitiveness and retraining in the face of the exit to the pandemic.
But the old business traditional models aren't going to work. So challenging and innovation or agility are the key words for the future.
I think the issue around digitalization is an issue that staff don't understand, most business leaders and their clients. So it's bringing everyone along on that particular journey, to my mind, is important.
I do think that there's positive signs ahead. We obviously have had overwhelming job losses and shrinking businesses, and I think that the need for flexible staffing will become even more apparent.
50% of the companies that we interview believe that they can't find people with soft skills like creativity, empathy, solutions problem, and so on.
Today on the show, Tom Hadley will have a conversation with Marta Lucas, policy advisor at the Spanish Federation ASEMPLEO, Luis Gastini, president at the Chamber of Private Employment Agencies of Argentina, and three other guests from the Federation of African Professional Staffing Organizations, Jackie Font, CEO of the Federation, and Jonathan Goldberg and Bev Jack, who are APSO board members. Thanks for joining us today, and over to you, Tom.
Thank you, Manon, and welcome everybody to our latest World Views on the World of Work podcast. And let's start this episode in Spain with Marta, and it'd be interesting to get your take on what you see as some of the current labour market challenges in Spain.
Okay. Yeah, digitalization is one of the greatest challenges. It will condition the future of world of employment as something transversal, beyond the fact that there are professions that are promoted. All jobs will be under the influence of digitalization. A second factor will be diversity, because the future of work will depend on socio-demographic changes. So therefore, the second of the great challenges of the labour market could have to do with the management of diverse talent and migratory flows, I think. And maybe another third challenge could have to do with retraining processes. There has to be a revolution. The training model must necessarily change, and we will go to a model with much shorter degrees, more linked to the company, with a kind of vital contract, with a model like maybe the Austrian backpack.
Thanks, Marta. And there's a lot in that already, isn't there? So one, the retraining revolution, and we'll perhaps return to that theme of retraining, reskilling later on in the podcast. But I also like the fact you mentioned an example of what was happening in Austria, and one of the big aims of the World Employment Confederation network is to encourage those sort of exchanges, to learn from what seems to be working in other countries and to promote that message to national governments. So let's saunter over to South Africa now and to Bev, and as well as working with APSO, the National Federation, Bev, you're the Group Executive for HR at Kelly Group, and it'd be really good to get your take on what some of the emerging challenges are down your way.
Tom, I think based on the job losses that we've seen and the rise in unemployment, the sustainable, job-rich economic growth is important. We talk about the human-centered agenda, and we need to ensure that there are stimulus packages to support the journey. But I think what is important to note in terms of your job-rich growth is to ensure that there's a focus on skills. Skills focusing on both the new jobs and also identifying the obsolete jobs.
Yes, and that's a really big theme, isn't it? Helping people transition from sectors where demand is going to be decreasing into sectors where demand is going to be increasing. And that's certainly a big theme of the World Employment Confederation's work going forward. Any other external factors on your mind, Bev, you wanted to mention right here at the start?
We need to focus on the transition from the informal to the formal economy. We haven't moved the needle on informality. And then finally and importantly, we need to look at the gig economy and the platform economy and how this impacts on us.
Thanks, Bev. And that point about addressing informality has come up in a number of our other podcasts, notably speaking to colleagues in India. That was a big theme there. And on the gig platform, I think there is a real challenge in terms of working with policymakers to find the right regulatory response and to drive compliance and ensure that workers and compliant businesses can thrive going forward. So thanks again for that. Let's move over now to Argentina. And Luis, it'd be great to get your take on that in terms of some of the challenges that you're seeing emerging in Latin America and particularly in Argentina.
We understand that we have to move from the concept of the new normal to a better normal, or new normal better for all, because the labor market will never be the same again, and we require unprecedented collaboration and coordination of all sectors, from companies and governments to unions, institutions, employees, etc. We are more than half of employers say that they cannot obtain the talent they need. This implies at least three major challenges for us: creating talent, transforming the recruitment model through technology, generating social impact by covering the gap between trained talent and people who are left out of the system.
Thank you, Luis. And the fact that 50% of employers in Argentina are saying that one of their big challenges is finding the right staff and the right talent, in some ways is good news for the HR services sector, isn't it? So let's head back over briefly to South Africa. And Jackie, as the CEO of APSO, the National Federation, any additional views from yourself in terms of this initial scene setting?
Thank you, Tom. So really the challenges, I think, as business and industry grapple with the aftermath that's being caused by the pandemic and the hit that will happen in terms of the global economy, I think there'll be challenges and tensions that are created between getting back to work and also rethinking how work is done. I think our industry will need to be able to evolve, to be able to support clients, to look at embracing innovative workforce solutions.
Thanks, Jackie. And I think that's spot on. And certainly a lot of the employers and business organisations I've spoken to are saying, look, we recognise that things are going to be very different. We're trying to preempt this future of work. But to be honest, we're not quite sure what we need to do. And I think there is a tremendous opportunity there for employment and HR services specialists to really help and ensure that employees can prepare for the future of work. So let's focus this next section on the skills agenda. And Luis, it'd be great to get your views from Argentina in terms of how workers are approaching this agenda, but also how employers are approaching it.
Almost 80% of employees say that they are ready to acquire new skills in the new normal. But in fact, the question is not who wants to adapt, but how we will do it. In that sense, only one of three human resources leaders say they are investing in training their workforce in new skills as part of their strategy for the future of work. And on the other hand, the expiration of knowledge is really faster, and the knowledge we receive from formal education is quickly out of date.
Wow, so it sounds like there's a real appetite from workers, a recognition from employers, perhaps that things need to change, but that things aren't really moving forward. So again, potentially an opportunity there for intermediaries, for the HR services sector to step in and make things happen. Bev, coming back over to you in South Africa, what sort of words would you use to characterise the current environment in terms of how employers are approaching the situation in terms of their own sort of business models going forward?
I think challenging, and that is because some of the traditional businesses, particularly our perm businesses, will need to evolve. So they need to be pretty agile right now. They need to be innovative. Like Jackie, I believe the opportunities are there. But the old business traditional models aren't going to work. So challenging and innovation or agility are the key words for the future.
Yes, and new business models requires new skills, which again underlines the importance of this topic. And Marta, turning to you in Spain, what do you see as our industry's role in terms of driving this sort of reskilling, retraining agenda?
Our industry in the short term It's a mechanism of flexibility and competitiveness and retraining in the face of the exit to the pandemic. If governments allow us to participate in retraining through, for example, active policies, we will be able to help move people between sectors, for example, from sectors which have been hit hardest, the hospitality sector or the tourism sector, to sector with more demand. So this is in the short term. In the long term, we will have to link it much more to the strategic, to the life cycle, both in the part of health as in the part of talent management. This is our role. To offer mechanisms of flexibility and with sustainability in terms of sustainable competitiveness. And the employment industry, the agencies, should be seen as a key factor for success, the difference between responding and competing or staying behind.
Thanks for that, Marta. And when we talk about reskilling, what sort of skills in particular are we talking about? So obviously digital, technical skills are up there, but anything else, Luis, perhaps you wanted to mention in terms of what you're seeing in Argentina?
50% of the companies that we interview believe that they can't find people with soft skills like creativity, empathy, solutions problem, and so on.
Okay, so Luis, what would be then your advice to young people just entering the world of work, for example?
I have a kid, 20 years old kid, and he's in the same situation. I believe that all the activities that can develop soft skills, it would be great for his career development.
Yes, and it's fair to say that as well as getting the right training and upskilling, getting practical experience in particular through temporary work is a great way of building those soft skills. So for this next section, let's look at how employers and business leaders are coping with this evolving landscape. And Johnny, as well as working again with APSO as the federation, you're the chief executive of Global Business Solutions, which gives you great insight into how business leaders across all sectors are dealing with this. And just keen to get your views on that. So where are we in terms of the broader business landscape in South Africa?
I think the issue around digitalization is an issue that staff don't understand, plus business leaders and their clients. So it's bringing everyone along on that particular journey, to my mind, is important. Leadership doesn't understand how quickly it's evolving, and often leadership's the problem. You've got leaders between the ages of 50 and 70 who've done things a certain way for 20, 30 years, and they believe that model's going to work going forward. And clearly we know it doesn't.
Yes, very, very interesting. And Johnny, is there any other trends or challenges in terms of business models that you're seeing emerge?
The other thing is, when you talk about outsourcing and business process outsourcing, a lot of South African and overseas companies don't have a proper model. So they don't have a proper business that is truly outsourced and productivity based. And I think those people who get that right will be successful. So a proper business outsourcing, processing business. I'm coming across cases now where it's still based on hours. And clearly that's not business processing outsourcing. It's got to be based on actual performance.
Thanks for that, Johnny. And let's stay on this sort of big picture theme about how we expect the sort of broader business landscape to evolve and some of the challenges there that we can see ahead. And let's shoot back over to Spain. And Marta, let's get your take on that, please.
The competitiveness of many economies, and Spain is a typical case, is going to depend more on talent management than on the capacity of innovation, I think. So in Spain, for example, we don't have the power to create patents. Yeah. And other countries, for example, like South Korea, Japan, China, Germany, they have it. But we have the capacity to attract digital talent. We'll be able to move forward. So we should not only depend as a country on the climate, on the tourism, but we also need to be able to offer guarantees to work with this digital talent.
Thanks, Marta. And that's a really great example, isn't it, of how the talent management, recruitment, HR services sector really is at the forefront of a country's competitiveness. So I think that's a really important point that you make. Thanks for that. And I guess the other message linked to this is that skills are not static. Talent increasingly is not static. So Luis, it'd be great to come back to you to get your views on that and bring it back again to this sort of education retraining agenda. What's your views?
The possibility of remaining employable, mainly in our country, is no longer guaranteed by formal education or private investment, and progress in terms of acquiring new skills requires cultivating an individual learning mindset. People will be able to be more independent and responsible for their own development.
Fantastic. And that brings us back to another area where the global HR services sector is and can make an impact, which is on education policy and actually working with schools, working with colleges, universities to help build that bridge between education and the world of work. Final section of the podcast now, and I want to finish by looking specifically at what the outlook is for flexible staffing and for the broader HR services sector. So let's start over in South Africa. And Jackie, what's your take?
I do think that there is positive signs ahead. We obviously have had overwhelming job losses and shrinking businesses, and I think that the need for flexible staffing will become even more apparent. We've seen this in past recessionary times. I know that this is considered to be the mother of all recessions, but effectively, flexible staffing as a means to enter recovery mode. As productivity starts to increase, I think the outlook for me is good.
Thanks, Jackie. And turning now to Luis in Argentina, do you see any specific issues or hooks or platforms upon which you think we can build to reposition the industry as we move towards a post-pandemic era?
We have a tremendous opportunity to take advantage of a lot of information that we generate at industry around the world, in every country, because big data will be the most important factor to make decisions in the human resources area. And we have a lot of data, a lot of information to process and give.
Thank you, Luis. So using data to reposition the sector, certainly in the eyes of clients, that's great stuff. Thank you for that. And Marta, let's come over to you in Spain. So what's your vision for the future of flexible staffing, and how would you go about pitching it almost in the post-pandemic era?
Well, I think the temporary work offers you the opportunity to get into the labor market, to have experience, to maybe there are a lot of people that don't know what is it to have a relation with a boss, with some colleagues. There are some basic things, but this is really necessary to go into the labor market. So this is one of the main things. And also it's opportunity to get into a user company for a permanent job. And I think the temporary work agencies also guarantees all the safe and healthy conditions for all.
Thanks for that, Marta. And of course, worker safety was at the heart of the World Employment Confederation's Alliance Task Force project. And it's great that you mentioned that in your comments at the end. So thanks again for that. Let's finish today's podcast back in South Africa with you, Johnny. And just to conclude, what are the words that spring to mind when you look at the agenda and the outlook going forward?
Opportunity, opportunity, opportunity. Opportunity across the client spectrum, and it's about timing, as I sketched the timing of this. And the timing comes as we get over the restructuring phase. Opportunities with workers, and I've been running something which I'm passionate about, is Own the Workforce. You need to get the hearts and minds of employees, and we've done a poor job of that. I was speaking to one of my UK counterparts last week, and basically middle management's disenchanted with the capitalistic system and their bosses. And unless we win that over, you've got no chance of even lower down. So there's big opportunities with workers. And then, of course, governments are flat out looking for opportunities in respect of creating jobs. So we've got opportunity over all those three sectors of the industry. And I can promise you in South Africa, And if we can influence anywhere in the world, we'll be working through those opportunities.
And a great upbeat note to finish on. A big thank you to all our guests today. So Marta giving us the perspective from Spain, Luis giving us the perspective from Argentina, and our sort of three musketeers giving us the perspective from South Africa. Thank you, Jackie. Thank you, Bev. And thank you, Johnny. And thank you all for listening to the podcast. Hopefully catch up soon on the next edition of Worldviews on the World of Work.
Love this episode of the podcast? Head over to iTunes or any of your favorite app to subscribe, rate, and leave a review. It's very much appreciated. Thank you.